My name is Margaret Hale, and I'm 52 years old. If you're listening to this right now, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're hearing my story from, because what I'm about to share isn't just a story. It's a warning. People say you can never really know someone's heart, not even the person your child chooses to marry. I learned that truth the hard way, just minutes before my daughter's wedding. The day had begun with sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows of St. John's Chapel, painting the old stone floors with patches of red, blue, and gold. It was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives, my daughter Lily's wedding day. Lily was radiant. Her smile could have softened the hardest heart. She had struggled with her weight all her life, and when she met Ethan, a charming young man with a steady job and kind eyes, I thought she had finally found peace. I thought he saw her soul. If only I had known the monster behind the mask. As the guests filled the pews with cheerful chatter and perfume and laughter, I stepped outside the main hall to get a moment of quiet. My chest was tight, the kind of nervous excitement only a mother feels when she's watching her little girl step into a new life. I walked down the back hallway of the church, cool, dimly lit, smelling faintly of candles and old wood. That's when I heard it. A laugh. Loud, vulgar, and so out of place in that holy silence that it made my heart jolt. I stopped. The sound came from a cracked door on my right, the groom's preparation room. My instincts whispered don't listen, don't do it, but something in that laughter froze me to the floor. Then came the voice that made my blood turn to ice. Just thinking about tonight, having to sleep with that fat cow, makes me sick. It was Ethan. My soon-to-be son-in-law. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Maybe he was joking about something else. But then another voice chimed in, dripping with mockery. Hey, at least you'll get the old lady's fortune. The Chestnut Meadow estate isn't small change. Another round of laughter, glasses clinking. Ethan's voice again, cold and amused. Oh, trust me. I'll tolerate her long enough to get the deed transferred. After that, who knows? Maybe I'll find a real woman to warm my bed. I gripped the wall to stop myself from falling. My hands trembled so hard my rosary beads slipped through my fingers, scattering across the floor like lost prayers. My daughter, the same girl who had spent nights crying because people called her names in school, was about to marry a man who saw her as nothing but a ticket to money. Every motherly instinct in me screamed to burst through that door, slap him across the face, and drag him out by his expensive suit collar. But I didn't. My reason, cold, sharp reason, told me to wait. If I caused a scene, Lily would be humiliated. She wouldn't believe me, not now, not like this. So, I turned away, every step heavier than the last, my heart pounding like thunder against my ribs. When I entered Lily's dressing room, the contrast almost broke me. She sat in front of a mirror, the morning light turning her veil into silver mist. Her eyes shone with hope, the kind of fragile light that makes you want to protect it forever. Her best friend Clara was helping her fix her earrings, humming softly. I smiled faintly, trying to hide the storm raging inside me. My mouth was dry, but I forced the words out. Clara, could you give us a minute? She hesitated, confused, but nodded and slipped out. When it was just the two of us, I took Lily's hands in mine. They were warm, trembling slightly. Sweetheart, I whispered, there's something I need to tell you. It's about Ethan. Her expression shifted, surprise, then worry. What about him? I took a shaky breath. I overheard him talking to his friends. He said awful things. He called you a fat cow, Lily. He said he's only marrying you for the Chestnut Meadow estate. For money. Her eyes widened, filling with disbelief. Then came the denial, fast and desperate. No, Mom. No, you misunderstood. He loves me. You just. I shook my head, tears burning behind my eyes. I wish I had misunderstood, honey. But I didn't. Her lip quivered, her face pale. He's not like that. He can't be. I could see the little girl in her eyes, the one who used to run into my arms when the world was cruel. But now she pulled her hands away, like I was the cruel one. "You're just afraid of losing me, aren't you, Mom?" she whispered. "You've always been protective. Maybe too much." That hurt more than anything. Before I could reply, Clara came back, pretending not to notice the tension. She wrapped an arm around Lily and said, almost too casually, "Mrs. Hale, maybe this isn't the time. Let Lily enjoy her big day." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes, they carried something else. A warning. Something about her calmness sent a chill down my spine. Moments later, the bells began to ring. I watched my daughter walk down the aisle, her white dress glowing under the stained glass light. She smiled, but there was a stiffness in her steps. And Ethan, he looked the part perfectly. Polished, composed, charming. A man no one would suspect of cruelty. As they exchanged vows, I felt my heart shatter piece by piece. Every "I do" echoed like a lie. The crowd clapped, the organ swelled, and confetti filled the air like snow. Everyone saw a beautiful wedding. Only I knew it was the beginning of a nightmare. But I stayed silent. For now. Because a voice inside me whispered louder than the bells. "You can destroy him. But not today. Not like this." And so, as the church doors closed and the new couple walked into their future, I began to plan. The trap had already started forming in my mind. If you're still listening, don't go anywhere. The reception at Chestnut Meadow should have been the happiest party of our lives. Lanterns were strung like soft stars above the garden, tables were dressed in lace and wildflowers, my neighbors and old friends circulated with glasses that caught the fairy lights and made them sparkle. Laughter hung in the air like confetti. Everyone wanted to congratulate the new couple. Everyone, except me. I had spent the morning wearing a calm I didn't feel. The image of Ethan's voice, the contempt, the laughter, the way he'd called my daughter a fat cow, kept replaying in my head. For hours I had turned over every possible way to stop him from taking what wasn't his by right, my family's legacy, our home, my daughter's life. I'd thought of confronting him, of exposing him raw and immediate. But the raw option would have humiliated Lily in front of the very people she loved. If she didn't believe me then, she sure wouldn't listen to a scandal. No, this had to be a trap so careful that there would be no room to deny it. I am not a vindictive woman by nature. I've fed neighbors, bandaged scraped knees, taught Sunday school for 30 years. But when it's your child on the line, something else takes over. A mother's calculation is quiet and patient. You wait until the moment your move will matter most. I had one advantage, I had kept the evidence. When I stepped into the groom's prep room that morning, I hadn't barged in. I had stood by the cracked door and, reckless with adrenaline, I turned on my phone recorder and held it just out of sight. The sound was grainy, but the words were there, Ethan's laughter, the clink of glasses, the line about the Chestnut Meadow estate. It felt like a sacrament between me and truth. I saved that file and slipped it into the back pocket of my purse like a loaded card. Now, standing under lantern light as the couple's first dance began, my pulse matched the rhythm of the string quartet. I watched Ethan glide across the lawn, Lily in a cloud of tulle, her smile blinding and trusting. People oohed and applauded, and a few had tears on their cheeks. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to step off for the person I loved most. My plan wasn't complicated, it was cruelly simple. I wanted the truth to be undeniable and public, to remove any wiggle room for excuses, to shatter the mask in a place where it could no longer be repaired. For that, I needed the right accomplices and the right moment. I'd spent the previous week quietly working the room. I'd befriended Jeff, an old college classmate of Ethan's who had fallen into the easier conversation of business and cheap jokes. He was the sort who thought loyalty meant staying on the winning side. I also found an ally in Mrs. Wellington, the mayor's wife, who loved drama but hated bullies. She'd promised me her presence at the microphone, should I need it. They didn't know the full script, they simply thought they were helping a worried mother keep her daughter's day pleasant. When the DJ announced the speeches, I felt time compress. People rose, clapped, and lifted water goblets. Toasts moved from heartfelt to silly to drunk. And then, right when laughter was at its warmest, I made my move. I walked toward the DJ booth like I was going to apologize for worrying over nothing. My knee still shook, but I kept my face smooth. As I passed the tables, I nodded to faces that had known me for decades and pretended everything was as it had been. At the booth, I leaned in and whispered to the DJ, a young man named Marco who'd played at every wedding in our county the last 5 summers. "Play track 3 when I give the signal," I said softly. "It's an old spool of the organ, Black Church. Then, at the end, fade in an audio file I'll hand you." I slid a flash drive into his palm. He looked skeptical. "This your music, Mrs. Hale?" he asked. I smiled and said, "Just trust me. It'll make sense." Marco shrugged. "All right, 1 foot in." He was young, and young people always wanted to be a part of something that felt like legend. Back at my table, I asked Jeff to stand and give a short speech about friendships. His face went pale when he realized what I had in mind, but he stood anyway, clearing his throat and praising Ethan's ambition and character. The applauses were polite and the glasses were raised. I watched Jeff, waiting for the microsecond when he would stop and the DJ would start the next track. At that exact microsecond, I tapped the stem of my champagne flute with my fingernail, the tiny, almost invisible signal we'd planned. The lights over the dance floor dimmed, the DJ's cue worked, and the air filled with a somber hymn, a single organ swell snapping the conviviality into silence. Guests looked around, puzzled. The quartet went silent. My heart hammered against my ribs. Then, because I had prepared for this, the speakers hummed, and the voice filled the garden, grainy at first, then clear. Ethan's voice, younger, crueler, laughing with men who sounded like brothers in wrongdoing. "Just thinking about tonight, having to sleep with that fat cow, makes me sick," the recording said, and then the rest, the talk of the estate, the clinking of beer bottles, the awful, casual contempt. You could have heard a pin drop. Somewhere, a napkin fell to the ground. Lily's hand flew to her mouth. She went pale as if someone had siphoned the blood from her face. Ethan stood frozen, his jaw working like a caged animal. Around us, conversations unraveled into a million small gasps. For a moment I watched, my chest aching with a bitter relief. I had feared my words would sound like a jealous mother's lonely paranoia, but the recording was indisputable. Faces turned toward Ethan. People whispered. Their smiles evaporated. Then, like an expert illusionist, Ethan tried to perform his first trick, denial. "That's edited," he said, loud and brittle. "Someone cut that. That's not how we were talking. This is tampered." His voice was calm enough that the closer guests leaned in, looking for the tear in reality. I had imagined this. I had expected his smooth defense. That's why I had the second piece, the ledger. Earlier that afternoon, while delivering the wedding cake to the prep room under the excuse of checking on vendor placement, a flimsy lie that had been met with nods, I had slipped a glance at the papers he kept on a side table, signatures of transfer, papers already prepared to be signed after the honeymoon. I took a few surreptitious photos with my phone and sent them to the mayor's wife with a terse message, "Look. This is what he's planning." She had agreed to hold them until the right moment. On the night of the reception, as Ethan jabbed at his defense, the mayor's wife stood. Her hands trembled slightly, but she was steady in her purpose. "Mayor Wellington will be delighted to speak," she said, and moved toward the microphone. She didn't need to speak long. She held up the phone as if it were evidence in a court and swiped to the ledger photos. The phone screen caught the lantern light and flashed the signatures, dates, and a clause that would have handed Chestnut Meadow into other hands after Lily signed nothing more than a pressed thumb. The murmurs became a roar. Someone accused. Someone else demanded explanations. Ethan's composure cracked. I saw him flinch as if hit. But then, because every plan has a fraying edge, Laura appeared. Clara, Lily's so-called best friend, who had been so defensive earlier and who had defended Ethan in the bride's room, stepped forward with a voice like silk wrapped around steel. "You've all lost your heads," she said, eyes on me. "Mrs. Hale, do you have any idea what you're doing? You've just ruined my friend's night." She looked at Lily with a smile that was too tight. "Is this what you wanted for her?" A handful of guests, loyal and comfortable with the easy narrative of a maligned mother, looked uncertain. Laura's words planted a seed of doubt. Maybe this was sabotage. Maybe Margaret wanted control. Panic started to leak into me. For the first time I saw how precarious my strategy was. A single doubt, a whisper of malice, and my daughter could dig in her heels and refuse to see the pile of truth on her lap. I could hear the old market whispers already, turning the story into gossip. And then, just as everything began to tilt, Lily did something I hadn't fully expected. Her face, streaked with mascara and red from crying, tilted toward Ethan. She stepped between us like a gauntlet. Her voice was small, but the steadiness in it was like glass. "Ethan," she said, and there was no tremor now. "If that's true, tell me right now. Tell me to my face." Her words were not the pleading of a child. They were a demand for honesty. Ethan swallowed. For a long breath he looked like a man deciding which mask to choose. The room waited. He could have lied his way out one more time. He could have begged for forgiveness and blamed editing and petty conspiracies. He could have smiled, taken Lily's hand, and mended the shredded tapestries with honeyed apologies. Instead, his mouth opened and nothing changed. He raised his glass, glanced at Laura, and said, "It was a stupid joke. I said things in the locker room. I was trying to impress the guys. I'm sorry if anyone was offended." It was an apology so small it didn't fit the wound it had caused. It was not enough. Not for me. Not for Lily. But it was enough for some. The garden tightened like a drum. For a moment it felt as if the future itself had stopped and was deciding how to fall. I had baited the trap, and the first catch had taken it. But deeper hooks were hidden, things I hadn't yet revealed, secrets that would force the town to pick sides. The night had changed, it had been pierced. But the story was only beginning. If you're still with me, tell me in the comments what you would have done when you heard that recording. Would you have screamed in the aisle? Or waited, patient and cold, to pull the thread until it unraveled the whole garment? The days after the reception felt like walking through fog. Every corner of Chestnut Meadow carried the echo of that night, the organ swell, the crackle of the speaker, the way faces shifted when they realized the man they'd toasted might be a liar. But a rumor is a living thing, it doesn't die quietly. It mutates, takes on color, and finds new mouths to breathe through. At the market, stalls that once called my name now turned away. The woman who sold my favorite cinnamon buns, whom I'd known since she was a girl, lowered her voice when I passed. "People say Mrs. Hale wanted attention," she murmured, like she was reciting something learned from gossip school. Children at the corner park, who used to chase each other across the meadow, started chanting a cruel rhyme about my fat cow that slashed clean through the old neighborhood protections I'd thought were unbreakable. One neighbor, Mrs. Cartwright, crossed my path with a look that was neither pity nor outright cruelty. "We all want what's best for Lily, Margaret," she said carefully, as if weighing words on a scale. "But it's hard. The town, people are confused. Some say you set him up." Her eyes flicked away. "You need to think about peace." Peace? The word felt like a stone in my mouth. I'd hoped the truth would free my daughter. Instead, it seemed to suffocate our history like smog. I began hearing that argument a lot. Was I protecting my daughter, or destroying her happiness? There were neighbors who believed me, of course. Mayor Wellington's wife kept her distance from the market gossip and made visits under the pretense of charity. Jeff sent me a note that read, "You did what needed to be done," and I tucked it into a drawer like a talisman. But the louder, crueler voice belonged to Clara. At first I told myself I'd misread her. Maybe the tension of wedding day had pushed her to protect Lily in a way that looked like betrayal. Maybe she sided with Ethan because she was frightened of change. But then Clara, showed her hand. It started with small things, a lens of doubt planted in a conversation, a correction to a story that favored Ethan. People would ask simple questions: who gave the recording to Mrs. Hale? And Clara would speak so casually about my temperament that it sounded like confirmation. You know, Margaret always wanted things her way, she'd say in a voice that felt like velvet. She did it in shops, at the church, even at the little cafe where Lily used to take me for pie. She was rewriting the narrative in real time, and the town, hungry for a simpler explanation, began to swallow it. One afternoon I decided I'd had enough of being told to be silent. I drove to Lily's house unannounced. The roses still bloomed along the walkway, trimmed and precise, like a polite smile hiding something cold. I wanted to see her face, to hold it, to show her the hard proof of what I'd heard. I wanted to tell her that anger had a weight and that sometimes a mother fury was the only honest thing left. Clara was there, as neat as a pressed letter, her gloves folded into composure. She opened the door with the ease of someone who expected you to argue and win. "Mrs. Hale," she said, like a greeting on a postcard, "we're having a small family lunch. Maybe now is not a good time." I stepped inside anyway. Lily sat at the table with a cup of tea, and for a heartbeat I believed she might finally see me. She looked up, tired, eyes soft with the slow burn of hurt. "Mom," she said, voice shaking like a leaf. "I heard about the market. I'm sorry people are saying things." "It's not what they say," I told her bluntly. "They heard him. I heard him call you names. He planned to use you for the deed. Look at these." I put the photos on the table, the ledger, the clause, the signature lines. Lily touched the paper like it was a reminder that reality sometimes hurts. Clara's hand rested on Lily's shoulder in a gesture that felt like ownership. "Lily," she said, too smoothly, "this is messy. Maybe your mother's fears are getting the better of her. Maybe you should just breathe and let this pass. People overreact." Lily looked between us, and something in her shifted, not the child who once clung to me for shelter, but someone leaning toward a future she'd already decided she loved, flaws and all. "I don't want to litigate our life, Mom," she said. "I married him. I know him. He's apologized. He said those were stupid locker room jokes. I want to make this work." That "I want" felt like a closed door slamming in my face. I realized then that the truth is only as useful as the heart willing to accept it. Lily's heart wanted a version of Ethan that could be fixed. Mine wanted someone who respected the woman I loved. After that day, Clara's presence became a barrier. She watched my visits with a cool, unblinking vigilance. I caught her once in the market smiling into her phone as if text messages were secret currency. When I tried to press Lily, she would find reasons to redirect, to humanize Ethan in the language of compromise. "Boys will be boys, people say worse things, love forgives." Then the worst betrayal came in a form I hadn't expected: the younger generation. Townspeople I'd known for years began to whisper about the Chestnut Meadow drama as if it were a soap opera episode. My neighbors, who'd once invited me to bridge nights and garden clubs, started to decline invitations, citing family things. Money, that ghost everyone seemed to see in Ethan's eyes, began to decide how relationships would hold. I tried to fight back in small ways. I printed copies of the recording transcript and mailed them to folks who mattered: the bank, a trusted notary, the family lawyer. I left a sealed envelope with the county clerk marked for emergency release if Lily's signature ever appeared on a suspicious document. But whispers have momentum, they feed on doubt and grow teeth. The clearest cut came when a note was pinned: "To my gate by morning, leave Lily alone. You'll only make it worse." No signature. No address. Just block-lettered threats in permanent marker. The children's chanting at the park turned into a cadence of cruelty. Even my name, once a small blessing in the neighborhood, became shorthand for scandal. At night I lay awake in the dark, listening for the creak of the old house, thinking of the ledger and the recording and the way people choose to see what fits their comfort. I wondered whether the law would care about a mother's foresight or if community would swallow the truth for the taste of a simple story. Through it all, one detail kept returning: Clara's smile. It was too perfect, too practiced. It was the kind of smile someone wears when they know the punchline before anyone else. I started digging quietly, like a gardener turning soil in winter. I asked small questions. I followed small leads. I learned that Clara had been very close with Ethan's college roommate, the same Jeff who'd awkwardly given the toast. I learned that Clara had a desire for a life that looked like the one Lily had, and resentment, perhaps, at being on the outside. The suspicion was a seed, but I needed roots, proof that Clara had a hand in shaping the town's memory. And so I started watching even when I wished I could close my eyes. One late afternoon, on a street where the sun sat like a coin on the pavement, I spotted Clara slipping an envelope into the mailbox of the local paperboy. My pulse stuttered. I walked faster, hands steady for once. I opened the mailbox and found a typed note asking questions about Mrs. Hale's campaign to ruin a wedding. The return address was anonymous. There was no signature, but there was a lipstick mark on the flap in a shade I knew only from Clara's purse. That night the town woke up to a new headline: local mother accused of sabotaging daughter's wedding. The story was thin, but the tone was pure, engineered suspicion. The writer had quoted a neighbor who said, "It seemed planned." I felt the world tilt. I wanted to scream. But the mother in me, the same patient force that had planned the trap, stayed quiet, cataloging, saving, arranging each piece as if composing a ledger of truth. If the town wanted narratives, I would give them facts. The revenge I'd begun was meant to protect Lily, yes. But it had also exposed how quickly affection could become accusation, and how betrayal sometimes comes from arms that once hugged you. The question now was how deep the rot went, and what I would have to do to prove, in a world of whispers and headlines, that some truths were worth holding on to no matter the cost. If you think you know who betrayed us next, hold on. Chapter 4, The House of Secrets will show you exactly how far I had to dig, and the one secret that finally made the town listen. If you're still with me, stay till the end, because what I found next didn't just prove Ethan's betrayal. It uncovered something darker, something that had been hiding in plain sight for years inside my own family. After that headline, local mother accused of sabotaging daughter's wedding, I became a ghost in my own town. People crossed streets to avoid me. Church pews that once felt like home now carried silence thick enough to choke on. But I didn't disappear. I watched. I waited. Because somewhere in that noise, someone was helping Ethan, and every instinct I had told me it was Clara. You learn a lot by listening when everyone thinks you've been defeated. I stopped defending myself. I smiled politely at the gossipers. And while they whispered, I began collecting. My first clue came from the florist, of all people. She told me Ethan had been in her shop a few days before the wedding, not unusual, except he wasn't ordering flowers for Lily. He'd been picking up an arrangement under a second name, CL Designs. At first it meant nothing. Then I remembered, Clara's initials. I called the florist's assistant that same night, pretending to be confirming an order. "Oh," she said lightly, "the tall man? Handsome, dark suit?" He said it was a surprise for the designer friend who helped him plan the proposal party. My throat went dry. Clara wasn't just a friend of Lily's. She'd been involved from the very beginning. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a pen and notebook, listing every detail I could remember. Times, names, whispers, expressions. The timeline told a story. Ethan and Clara had been exchanging messages for months, under the pretext of wedding planning, decor coordination, and surprise errands. Lily, sweet and trusting, had no idea. I needed proof, not just patterns. So I went looking. The next morning, I drove to Lily's new home, Ethan's now, too, with the excuse of dropping off old photos. Clara's car wasn't outside, but I knew better than to assume. I waited until I saw Ethan leave in his black sedan. 10 minutes later, Clara appeared, letting herself in with a spare key. My chest tightened. I parked a few houses down and waited. An hour passed before she left again. As soon as she disappeared around the corner, I walked to the back door. My old key, from when I'd helped Lily move in, still worked. Inside, the air was heavy with lavender and lies. I moved through the living room quietly, like someone walking through a memory. There were traces of Lily everywhere, her books, her candles, her wedding photo still smiling on the mantel, but the energy in that house felt different now. Tainted. On the desk in the study, I found it, a small white envelope with Clara's handwriting. It wasn't addressed to anyone. Just one line across the top, in case she finds out. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a printed contract, a private financial agreement between Ethan and Clara. She had been receiving consulting payments from him for 6 months, money labeled as design fees but clearly unrelated to any real work. At the bottom was a clause promising mutual discretion regarding personal matters. I didn't need a lawyer to read between those lines. And then, tucked inside the same envelope, was something worse, a photo. Ethan and Clara, taken months before the wedding, sitting together in a lakeside cafe. His arm around her. Her head resting against his shoulder. Not just colleagues. Not just friends. The world tilted for a second. My breath went shallow. I wanted to throw the photo into the fire, to destroy the evidence so it could stop hurting. But I didn't. I slipped it into my purse. Proof doesn't need to be pretty, just undeniable. As I turned to leave, I heard the faint creak of a floorboard upstairs. My body froze. I wasn't alone. Footsteps descended slowly, measured, deliberate. And then Lily's voice. "Mom?" I turned, guilt and shock mixing in my chest. "Lily, I was just. What are you doing here?" Her eyes darted to my hands, to the envelope. "You went through my things?" "I was protecting you," I said, my voice breaking. "I found something, Lily. You need to see this." But she didn't take the papers. She just stared, her expression torn between love and exhaustion. "You have to stop," she whispered. "You're making things worse." "Worse?" I said softly. "He's cheating on you. With her. With Clara. I have proof." "Stop it," she shouted, louder now. "You're ruining my marriage. You want to be right more than you want me to be happy." Her words hit harder than any slap. I wanted to scream that happiness built on lies always collapses, that someday she'd see the truth, but before I could say it, Ethan's car pulled up outside. "Please," Lily said quickly, tears filling her eyes. "Just go. Before he sees you." I looked at her one last time, my daughter, trembling and blind to the man standing on quicksand, and then I walked out. I didn't run. I didn't argue. I just left, carrying the proof in my purse like a ticking clock. That night, I couldn't sleep. I played the recording again, over and over, letting the words pierce through the walls until dawn. I realized that if I went to Lily again, she'd shut me out completely. No, I needed to go higher. To someone who could make Ethan answer publicly, someone the town respected enough to listen. I started with the mayor. Then the bank. Then the lawyer who'd handled our property deeds. Each received a copy of the consulting agreement and the photo. Quietly. No drama. No headlines. I wanted the truth to travel like wildfire, invisible at first, then unstoppable. A week later, it began. Ethan's accounts were frozen pending an audit. Clara's boutique closed without warning. The mayor's wife called to tell me someone had tipped off the paper about financial inconsistencies. And then, the best news of all, Lily showed up at my door, eyes swollen, voice trembling. "He's gone," she said. "He left in the middle of the night." I took her into my arms. She didn't speak for a long time. When she finally did, it wasn't anger I heard, it was grief. "How did I not see it?" she whispered. "You loved him," I said gently. "And love makes us blind to shadows." For the first time in months, my house felt warm again. But deep down, I knew the story wasn't finished. People like Ethan don't vanish. They regroup. And Clara, I wasn't convinced she'd given up her part of the game. Because 2 days later, I found something strange on my porch, an unmarked box with no note. Inside, a single flash drive. No name, no label. Just one file titled, "You Don't Know Everything." If you think the story's over, you're wrong. What I found on that drive changed everything I thought I knew about Ethan, Clara, and my own daughter. If you're still here, take a deep breath, because what I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about this story. And if you haven't already, hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're listening from, because when you hear what was on that flash drive, you'll understand why I couldn't keep this secret any longer. The box sat on my kitchen table like it was breathing. I must have stared at it for a full 5 minutes before I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The screen flickered, and a single video file appeared, timestamped 2 weeks before Lily's wedding. When the video started playing, I saw a familiar room. Ethan's office. He was sitting at his desk, laughing. Across from him sat Clara, calm, confident, her red lipstick glowing under the dim light. But then someone else entered the frame. It was Lily. My heart clenched. She was smiling, oblivious, holding a stack of folders. The video had no audio, but their gestures told the story, Ethan rising, hugging her, brushing her cheek before turning back toward Clara. Lily handed him papers and left the room. Ethan and Clara exchanged a look that made my stomach turn. Then the second clip started. Same office. Different day. Clara sat alone, typing something on Ethan's computer. She opened a folder labeled Chestnut Estate Transfer. I watched as she scrolled through documents, stopping at one page. My name. My signature. My land. My family's inheritance. I froze. Clara wasn't just having an affair. She was helping Ethan transfer property ownership, forging my signature on documents Lily had unknowingly signed as a witness. The estate I'd built with decades of sweat and grief was being stolen from right under our noses. The third video was short, only a few seconds. Ethan speaking directly into the camera, as if recording a message. His smirk was unmistakable. By the time she realizes what happened, it'll be too late. The old woman won't have anything left to fight with. The video ended abruptly. I sat there in silence, my pulse racing in my ears. Whoever had sent that flash drive knew everything, maybe more than I did. But who? I checked the box again. No fingerprints, no note. Just one faint scent, jasmine. Clara's perfume. It didn't make sense. Why would she send me evidence that could destroy her? Unless she hadn't. Unless someone wanted me to think she did. That night, I didn't sleep. I packed every file, every photo, every bit of proof I had into a folder. At dawn, I drove to the police station. But halfway there, something made me stop. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. If you go to the police, you'll lose her forever. Attached was a photo, Lily, sitting at a cafe, her face pale, eyes downcast. Next to her was a man I didn't recognize, whispering something to her. My hands went cold. I didn't know who had taken that photo or what it meant, but the message was clear, I was being watched. This wasn't just about Ethan or Clara anymore. There were more people involved. So I made a choice. I wouldn't go to the police. Not yet. I'd finish what I started, quietly. I called a family friend, Mr. Harris, a retired lawyer who had once helped my husband with land disputes. When I told him everything, he listened in silence, his eyes dark with disbelief. Audrey, he finally said, what you have here, it's criminal. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy. If we handle this wrong, they'll bury you in court before justice ever sees the light. Then we handle it right, I replied. For days, I worked with him in secret, filing legal traps Ethan would never see coming. We had evidence of document tampering, financial transfers, even recordings. Each piece of proof was a blade, sharp, quiet, and ready. Then came the morning the storm broke. Ethan showed up at the ranch uninvited. His perfect smile was gone. His eyes were wild. "You've been snooping," he said, voice low. "You think you can take me down?" "I don't think," I said calmly. "I know." He took a step closer, his hands shaking. "You don't understand, Audrey. It's bigger than you think. You're just a piece of the deal." "What deal?" I demanded. But before he could answer, tires screeched outside. A black SUV stopped by the gate, and two uniformed officers stepped out. Mr. Harris had already done it, the warrants had been approved that morning. Ethan froze, realizing too late. The officers approached. "Ethan Grant?" one asked. "You're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to defraud." His expression shattered. "You can't prove." "Oh, but I can," I said quietly. "And so can the woman who sent me that drive." He looked at me sharply. "You mean Clara?" I shook my head. "No. It wasn't Clara." The truth came out days later. The flash drive hadn't been from Clara, it was from someone inside Ethan's own company. His assistant, who had overheard everything and wanted out before it all collapsed. Clara, on the other hand, had vanished. No forwarding address. No trace. Just gone. As for Lily, she finally saw the truth. Watching her cry when the police confirmed Ethan's crimes broke me all over again, but it also healed something deep inside. She moved back to the ranch, started painting again, slowly rebuilding the life he'd almost stolen from her. One evening, we sat on the porch together, the sky painted orange and violet. She took my hand and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." I smiled faintly. "Don't be. You just loved the wrong man. That's not a sin, it's a lesson." For the first time in months, the world felt still. But sometimes, in that stillness, you hear echoes, reminders that some stories never truly end. A week after Ethan's arrest, I received one final envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, Clara standing on a pier in another city, smiling faintly. On the back, in neat handwriting, just 4 words. He wasn't the only one. I don't know what that means yet. Maybe she's still out there. Maybe there's more I haven't uncovered. So tell me, if you were in my place, would you stop digging? Or would you open the next door, even if it meant finding another lie? Because deep down, I think the real story has only just begun.